youngest justice on the Supreme Court. He served 34 years and helped establish the illegality of the slave trade in the Amistad case. His name was Joseph Story, and he died this day, September 10th, 1845. A founder of the Harvard Law School, Joseph Story stated, "Where can the purest principles of morality be learned so clearly or so perfectly as from the New Testament?"
This has been an American Minute with Bill Federer. For a free transcript, call American Minute at 1-888-USA-WORD.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us on Crosstalk here on VCY America. Yesterday, we welcomed new listeners out of the Wausau, Wisconsin area. Today, we welcome new listeners in the Kanab, Utah area, listening over KWOT 90.9 FM. So glad to have you with us here on Crosstalk. Ladies and gentlemen, without question, biblical moral values are under attack. I mean, this country can't escape even 1 hour where someplace across this nation there are ads airing advocating the taking of preborn life under the guise of reproductive choice. The slaughter of the preborn ought to absolutely disgust this nation. But somehow we find it acceptable, as many are making it their last stand with great criticism against those who are seeking to preserve innocent human life. Battles are also looming in school district after school district about it's after the Biden administration is trying to redefine sex. This is the Biden-Harris administration trying to redefine sex to include sexual orientation and gender identity. Just yesterday, I learned about yet another district, the D.C. Everest School District near Wausau, Wisconsin, and the small communities of Schofield and Weston passed a policy not to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity in its education programs or activities. Girls, you better watch out in the D.C. Everest School District. But it's not only there, it's happening across this country, both in urban, suburban, and rural areas. To me, it's outrageous that there are people in this world who are serving in positions of authority who are actively fighting, as we speak, for the right to bodily mutilate minors in irreversible ways. Lives are being destroyed, ladies and gentlemen, and people are applauding their actions. Further across this country, girls and women's sports are being decimated by biological males identifying as female, who previously competed as boys or men, but now have great delight in breaking girls' records and denying them opportunities. Think about it. Men decimating women and women's rights groups are silent. Well, the list of these attacks on values could be enumerated for hours, but with us today is an individual whose organization is fighting for moral values in his state and is making a difference. Joining us today on Crosstalk, we welcome Jonathan Saenz. He is president of Texas Values. They are a nonprofit group dedicated to preserving and advancing a culture of family values in the state of Texas. Prior to leading Texas Values, Jonathan headed the First Liberty Institute offices in Austin, where he served as Director of Legislative Affairs as well as attorney for First Liberty Institute. He's been involved in numerous court cases, including those before the Texas Supreme Court as well as the United States Supreme Court. Jonathan, thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be with you.
So it appears that the culture war is just literally off the charts right now. And, you know, when I was growing up, the things unfolding today were considered absolutely abhorrent. Yet today there are those who are actively fighting to normalize them. What's going on, Jonathan?
Well, look, I mean, it's everywhere you look, too. And, I mean, when I got started in this work 20 years ago in law school, it was about whether or not a student could pray over, you know, his or her meal at lunch hour in a public school. And now we're fighting to make sure that your child doesn't have a drag queen who's sexual in nature reading to your kids without the school telling you. Things have moved. The line has moved so much. And you're seeing it's interesting, too. We're not even talking about political issues anymore. There are, you know, growing number of Democrats that agree that these things have gotten out of hand. Some elected officials, including one here in Texas who just left the Democratic Party and joined the Republican side because she had it with how out of control some of those platform and priorities were. You know, she doesn't think it's right that kids are going to have their bodies operated on and so-called transitioning them from a boy to a girl or a girl to a boy. And we have a state law that says it's not legal to do that. And so she defended that law, Senate Bill 14, and as a result of that, the Democrats in power turned against her. But, these things don't have to be, they can be bipartisan, and many times they are, but it's hard to open up your, app or, look at the news these days without seeing more examples of it. We're going to be highlighting that at an event we're having this weekend, the Texas Faith Fest. People can find out about that. And, look, we ran out of topics to we had so many topics to talk about, we ran out of room for all of them, but we spread it out over 2 days. But not to be concerned. And these things can concern you. There's no doubt. You got to be aware of what's going on. But many times when we show up, when other groups show up, when we individually stand up and say, this isn't right, and I'm not going to allow it to happen, and we exercise our constitutional rights, and we exercise our parental rights, and these things, and we team up with groups like ours and First Liberty and others, we get victories. But you have to be willing to embrace that it's happening, and it's not going to go away unless we do something about it.
And we're going to be hitting on a lot of issues today, and I know there are those who are listening right now who say, Jonathan, what good does it do? I speak up and things only get worse. It seems we're losing battle after battle after battle. What do you say to those who are weary in battle and ready to throw up their arms in defeat?
Well, look, 2 years ago, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. I've been working in the pro-life movement for close to 3 decades, and, I was born almost 9 months after Roe versus Wade was decided, and so I didn't know that would ever happen, and it has. Okay, that was 2 years ago. So there's, the pro-life movement has certainly moved in a very strong direction, even though now we're seeing these battles play out at the state level. But the bill I just mentioned, Senate Bill 14, some people call it help, not harm. It's legislation that protects kids under 18 from having their bodies cut up and mutilated and operated on, from puberty blockers that suggest that they can change them from a boy to a girl, and has devastating effects. Chloe Cole has talked about this. She was a teenager who went through a transition and then said, I don't want to do this anymore, but it wrecked her body, and now she goes around talking to people about it so they don't make the same mistake. That law has been passed in, I think, over 20 states in the country, and so there's a movement. And there's a response to these things. Sometimes it takes longer than we want it to take, but, there is a response. And so when people get motivated, when they get organized, and when we get focused and we look at the issue and find that common ground, we can have success, but you got to be firm, right? You got to be ready. And there's going to be sacrifice sometimes, no doubt. There's sometimes someone's not going to like you, or somebody in your neighborhood is going to say something negative about you when they don't know the full story, or whatever people are going to say on social media that you don't even know. So that might happen, but that's a small price to pay, so to speak, for protecting our Constitution and protecting common sense.
I brought up the area of life, and it's a major issue right now in the presidential campaign, as it is also in the battle for the House and Senate. The Dobbs decision you referred to has significantly impacted states and impacted Texas in particular. Tell us what's going on in Texas.
Well, look, in the state of Texas, I think the latest report was there was 1, if not 0, abortions last year.
Wow.
It's incredible. It's practically a miracle, but that is how things have moved, because we passed the Texas Heartbeat Law, which Texas values, and with my leadership, we led that effort in the state of Texas to pass that law. But then there was also a law that was passed, the Human Life Protection Act, that said if Roe versus Wade is overturned, the babies are protected completely, right? And so that's been in effect now for a couple of years, and if not 3, and has been upheld by the courts. And so, the law is a teacher. That's what I learned in law school at the University of Houston Law Center. People often decide how they're going to behave, if you will, and decisions they're going to make based on what's legal. And now that you can't perform, take the life of an unborn child in Texas, guess what? That's not happening. And so, but I think other states are starting to move that direction. There are some ballot issues that are on the ballot in November. People have to understand what's at stake. A lot of those people that are supporting abortion, they want abortion on demand. They think that even if a baby is born alive as a result of a failed abortion, that's okay. We can't have those type of policies. It's just inhumane. But we are seeing a lot of movement, and look, it's at the state level. You got to pay attention to who's being elected in your state legislature. You got to be engaging with people locally. I rarely travel to D.C., even though I love going up there, and there's a lot of great people, because my role and my focus is at the state and local level. And so I think the more that people dig in there and have those conversations with people, and pay attention to what's on the ballot and, who's in charge and who's on the ballot as far as elected officials. And we focus on the science. We focus on the humanity. An unborn child feels pain at a very early stage. A heartbeat starts at 6 weeks. That is a living human being, is one example. And so I think as more people receive that information and step back from the political nature, these are easy decisions to make.
Jonathan Saenz with us today, president of Texas Values. You mentioned the states. I think there's some 10 states that are facing this abortion referendum on the ballot. But one of my concerns, Jonathan, is that the vast majority of those who profess Christianity are not registered to vote. And of those Christians who are registered, many do not vote. What would you have to say to them today?
Yeah, look, that's a real concern. Even in Texas, we're part of a project and an entity called iVoter Guide, just like the iPhone, right? iVoter Guide. If you go to their website or go to our website in TexasFreeVotersGuide.com, but many states have a coalition and a partnership in their own state with iVoter Guide. This doesn't tell you who to vote for. It doesn't give you endorsements. It simply tells you where the candidates stand on the issues. Mm-hmm. We're talking about at the federal level, presidential, congressional races, state legislature, even school board and city council races are covered in some areas. You get to look at the information on your own. You go to the website, iVoterGuide.com, and it pulls up a personalized ballot for you, right? You don't have to sift through all the information. You just put in your address and it pops up. And so, and look, that this helps people too, because a lot of times people don't vote because they're not sure who's on the ballot and they don't want to make a mistake. Check out iVoterGuide.com and encourage your pastor, your religious leader at your church to remind people that it is a Christian thing to do, that the Bible really commands and encourages us to be involved in civic life, and that includes voting. And look, we get all jazzed up in Texas about the phrase in the Bible, the flag, come and take it. That's what some people want to do. They will want to come and take Christianity and godly heritage away from us unless we show up at the ballot box.
And friends, can we encourage you to go and check, are you registered to vote in your state? If you're not, get registered to vote, become informed on the issues, be informed on the candidates, be informed on the ballot matters that will be on your ballot this coming November 5th, and to go and cast a prayerful vote. So very, very critical. There is another issue on the life aspect here, and we just saw what I believe is a concerning decision by the U.S. Supreme Court denying Oklahoma access to the federal Title X funding because the Biden-Harris administration targeted them. And it's feared that Kamala Harris would be allowed to penalize pro-life states, even like Texas, that protect babies. Do you have a concern regarding that?
Oh, there's no doubt. Look, when Kamala Harris was Attorney General of California, she targeted the pro-life movement. She wanted to keep pregnancy centers that help moms and babies. She wanted them shut down. She wanted them, looked at as criminal in some nature. She targeted, Supreme Court and judicial nominees that were a part of the Knights of Columbus, which is a Catholic service organization, because they believe that marriage is between one man and one woman, and that we should protect innocent unborn children. So I have no doubt she'll try to bring that to Texas, just like Biden has tried to. But every time our Attorney General, Ken Paxton, has stood up, we've won in court when there's been pushback. We've passed state laws to counter what the Biden and Kamala administration has tried to do. We've got a great program in the state of Texas that I hope is insulated from what the feds are going to try to do, and we'll see what happens in November. But it is a way to give funding to nonprofit entities that protect moms and babies all the way up to 3 years, all the way up till the baby is 3 years. They can get support, whether it's diapers and formula, rent assistance, a whole bunch of things, because sometimes you do see those crisis pregnancies. We have a website set up so people can access this called LoveThemBothTexas.com. You put in your zip code and you can find a pregnancy center, a help center somewhere close to you. $130 million by our state legislature has been allocated for this, and we hope more states do that.
That's LoveThemBothTexas.com. Speaking of Texas, a major conference coming up this coming weekend. We're going to tell you about that after the break, put together here by Texas Values. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network. Back in just 1 minute.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, creation author with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, you say that there was no death before Adam sinned. But what about plants? I mean, didn't Adam eat plants?
Yes, Chris, Adam and Eve did eat plants in the Garden of Eden. But was this really death in the biblical sense? There's a profound theological distinction between plants and animals in the Bible. Both man and the animals are described as having life, Hebrew nephesh, which plants don't have. The term life is reserved for those animals in whose nostrils is the breath of life, and also by the fact that life is in the blood. Plants have neither breath nor blood. Thus, the eating of a plant in the Garden of Eden wouldn't necessarily involve death. Plants are biologically alive, but they're not biblically alive in the sense that they do not have true life. You see, Chris, there's always an answer to the anti-creationist questions. Back to Genesis. Now that works.
Thanks, Dr. Morris.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. Jonathan Saenz is with us today, president of Texas Values. They're a nonprofit group dedicated to preserving and advancing a culture of family values in the state of Texas. And Jonathan, I understand you've got a major event coming up this weekend. Tell us about it.
We do. It's called Texas Faith Fest. This is the seventh year in a row we've done it. For many years, we called it the Texas Faith Family and Freedom Forum. That was a mouthful, so we've shortened it to Texas Faith Fest. You can go to our website, texasfaithfest.com, or just go to our main website, texasvalues.org. But it's a two-day event, very similar. Some people have been to this event a few years ago. Family Research Council did an event called Value Voter Summit. Ours is focused a little bit more on the state-level work, but we do include some national speakers. I'm just blown away this year, Jim, of the lineup. We've got close to 40 speakers, but the headliners, Governor Mike Huckabee, Michael Knowles, who's got a nationwide podcast and best-selling books, and has teamed up with Senator Cruz before on his podcast, Verdict. We've got some other exceptional speakers that are going to tell some incredible stories. We talked about the life issue. Melissa Oden is an abortion survivor. Mm-hmm. She runs the Abortion Survivors Network. Her life was almost taken when she was 7 months in the womb. She survived. She's now an adult and talks about her experience and encouraging other people that have gone through something similar. You got to hear her talk in person. It'll give you goosebumps. But we've got other incredible people like our Agriculture Commissioner, Sid Miller, former senior Trump advisor and Governor Abbott advisor, Steve Munisteri is going to be there. A phenomenal young leader on the rise, Mary Margaret Olahan, who writes for the Daily Wire. We're excited about her. Congressional member of the House Representatives, Chip Roy, from our state here in Texas, is going to be here, and some great news outlets I know that are going to be on site, and I'm looking forward to it. Look, I'll just tell you one other thing. Okay, there's a group of speakers, two of them, that have pushed back on the gender transition issue on kids. Okay, y'all might have heard some of this. The Department of Justice has indicted this Dr. Heim, Eitan Heim. This was at Texas Children's Hospital, which is one of the biggest entities on this issue in Texas as far as a hospital. But they were telling the legislators and the public that they weren't doing these gender transition on kids last year when we were working on passing a law to protect kids from these things. Well, Dr. Heim was a resident then at the time, and he was seeing that it was still happening. So he blew the whistle on it. Well, guess what? The Biden administration has indicted them. The Department of Justice is trying to put him in jail for 10 years. He's going to speak, unless he's in jail that day. And I don't say that tongue-in-cheek. This is on him. The other speaker in this panel is a nurse, Vanessa Sivage. She was at Texas Children's Hospital. Guess what she thinks is happening according to what she's seeing? She thinks that Texas Children's Hospital is covering up these gender transitions, some on kids, by engaging in Medicaid fraud, by labeling things that are billed to Medicaid that shouldn't be as a way to cover up what they're really doing. They blew the whistle. Now, the Department of Justice has not indicted her yet, but they did come to her door and, scared, the heck out of her on this issue. She's going to be on that panel. That's going to be on Saturday. Wow, it's going to be absolutely incredible to hear them speak, and what bravery. But we want people to get that experience. So TexasFaithFest.com, there's close to 35 or 40 speakers at all different levels. You're going to learn something. Look, I'm going to tell you right now, events like this, and including this event, they have the potential to change your life, okay? About 25 years ago, I went to an event where Jay Sekulow was speaking, okay? He's one of the most accomplished Christian lawyers at the U.S. Supreme Court. I wanted to do work like that, all right? I was, nobody. No one knew who I was. I wasn't working anywhere. I was a aspiring law student, and I just went to this event in Virginia that Liberty University had when they were opening their law school. I got to meet my hero, Jay Sekulow. I read his book. I was like, man, I want to be like you, right? Meeting him in person, shaking his hand, and just getting a word of encouragement from him meant the world to me. And, I owe it to him and many others that I'm in a position now to do work like he does and really impact people's lives, save lives, and, and protect our religious freedoms. And so I just encourage people, consider coming to the event, TexasFaithFest.com. If you're in Texas, if you've got to travel from another state, we got people from other states that are coming as well, or you want to check it out online. Look, there's something to offer for everyone.
And this is being held in Austin?
That's correct. This is at Great Hills Baptist Church, northwest part of Austin, just on the tip of the hill country. And look, this is current information. We try to bring people that are speakers that things are happening right now. And a lot of times it's people who maybe you've sort of heard of or you're not really aware of. 2 years ago, we had Riley Gaines. A lot of people didn't know who she was. We had met her. She was starting to get, a little bit out there as far as public attention. She was on a panel. Now we have events with her. She's the keynote, right? So you never know who's going to be there that is the up-and-comer. One of those athletes is Macy Petty, former collegiate volleyball player. She's going to talk about the Save Women's Sports issue. But it's, it's just so many different people there that are about the issues that are happening right now, as well as elected officials that are wanting to do something about it as well. TexasFaithFest.com is the website.
Let's hit another issue here, Jonathan, and that is the redefinition of, Title IX that we have the Biden-Harris administration been trying to force on this country. And I mentioned in my introduction the D.C. Everest School District being one of the latest caving in on this matter, and I could literally read hundreds of other school districts caving as well. But just a matter of days ago, the parents in the Colorado School District, specifically it was a Jefferson County Public Schools, filed a lawsuit because their 11-year-old daughter on an overnight field trip forced to share her bed with a biological male who identified as a girl. And she only learned about this arrangement as she was getting ready for bed that night on the first night of the trip. Keep in mind, parents were told girls will be roomed together on one floor, boys will be roomed together on another floor. Parents had that comfort level, but they did not say how they were defining the term girl and boy to include those of gender identity. I mean, things like this are unfolding all across the country.
Yeah, it's absolutely out of control. We've seen it in Texas, unfortunately. Close to the Austin area, there's a school district, Round Rock School District, which is a suburb, if you will. Dell Computers has a big hub there. This school district is one of the worst in the state of Texas, if not the country. We've seen documents where they're doing the exact same thing. They're not telling parents about these things. They're hiding them in all kinds of different ways. And, yeah, parents find out after the fact. But look, when we do something about it, we can win on these issues. Our Attorney General has filed I don't know how many lawsuits along with other states pushing back against this effort to redefine Title IX. There's an injunction in place on, I think, over half the states in our country, including Texas now, to stop the Biden administration. And they had trouble with it for a couple of years. I mean, we've been pushing back against it. We've had people that have been sending letters and expressing their concern. And so it took them a long time to even get the agency rule or whatever they're trying to call this passed, because there was so much pushback. And a lot of times it's not just Republicans, if you will, or conservatives, it's Democrats as well. And but look, this is what we're going to have to do. This is on the ballot. I mean, look, I know this is not necessarily, this isn't a political issue. This is a values and safety issue. You have to know that when you go to the ballot box, whether it's the presidential or on down the line, this is one of the most important issues you got to figure out. And Biden administration and Kamala Harris, they are the wrong side of this issue. They will put your daughter in jeopardy. They won't tell you about it. You'll find out after the fact. And I hope and pray that there's no damage as a result of that, because that is a real threat. But that's what you're voting for in November.
Also they're voting on this matter of allowing bodily mutilating surgeries on minors. And I know places like California are becoming a haven for minors to come and obtain such procedures. In Minnesota, watch out there. Procedures that are irreversible without parental knowledge or consent. And I know this is something that you have fought in the state of Texas.
Yeah, look, I mean, we've had some legislative hearings about this. It's like the wild, wild west. This is not science. This is not medicine. It's a total disaster and a danger and threat. And the cover-up that's going on is absolutely out of control. But we've called them out on it. We passed a state law. Other states have passed state laws to stop these type of things from happening. We're going to have a panel on this. The bill author in Texas, Dr. Tom Oliverson, who's also running to be our next Speaker of the House, he's going to be at this TexasFaithFest.com. We're going to talk about that issue. And then there's a lot of issues that are happening at the education level. We're going to have a school board member there. We're going to have an administrator, the president of West Texas A&M, who's been pushing back on some of these issues too. There are some good guys and gals out there that are in public schools and universities that want to do the right thing, but they need to know who they need to match up with and team up with to get the right things done. But we put out a document this year that we sent to all 1,200 school districts in the state of Texas, making them aware of what the law is on these issues so they can get some encouragement to follow it. One of the school districts in Texas, Carroll ISD, has been doing a wonderful job following current law, because this is not current law. They're trying to change things at the agency level without congressional approval. You cannot redefine sex. It just does not make sense, no matter how hard they try. There's male and there's female. But as I mentioned before, I mean, it matters what the law says. So we've got to put the right people in place to get these things right. You got to have the right judges in place. You have to have the right elected officials.
Yeah.
And you have to not be afraid to stand up, post on social media, talk about it at different events at your church, and get the conversation started. You'll probably find out there are a lot of people that agree with you.
Yeah, and we have judicial conferees, the seeking confirmation, who are scratching their head trying to come up with a definition of what it is to be a woman or a man. It's disheartening. We were talking about sports just a little while ago as well, and we shout from the rooftop the need for fairness, yet we have girls having their hard work destroyed. Their records are being broken. Scholarship chances are being taken away by biological boys identifying as girls. And I know you've made some headway on this in the state of Texas as well.
Yeah, look, and some other states are working on this too. I have a 14-year-old daughter who's in competitive athletics, and many people do. And even if you don't, you can understand how these issues are important. But, they start at very young ages to try to, get good at these sports and dedicate their lives and balance their studies. These young ladies, particularly at the collegiate level, I mean, they're facing very demanding academic careers, as well as, such a high level of sports. They have a very disciplined atmosphere. Riley Gaines talked about this when Will Thomas, the guy from Texas who was male and was on the women's swim team a couple of years ago, and we saw that issue and that story just break open. When he went into her locker room with those other girls, they weren't told. They didn't tell them ahead of time that was going to happen. Traumatized them. And look, this guy just stripped down. Nothing had changed. The only thing that changed was his hair was longer, right? And so this is what they think about women. They don't care about them. They think that they're dispendable, or that, just deal with it, or we're going to kick you off the team, or you're going to get kicked out of school, right? They're forcing them. But, I'm encouraged that people like Martina Navratilova, who's, one of the most famous lesbians in sports, right? Decades ago, she was sort of a pioneer, if you will, and she's even saying this is wrong, right? It's not a left and a right issue. It's a common sense, a fairness issue. We had a speaker last year, Paula Scanlon, who was a teammate of Leah Thomas, Will Thomas, talked about her devastating experience. Look, there are a lot of girls that are not going to go into sports, or they're going to go to a different university because they want to go somewhere where they're respected, where, they're protected as well. Look, collegiate athletes, sports has been one of the strongest indicators of success for young ladies. And as a matter of fact, an overwhelming percentage of female CEOs for Fortune 500 companies have a competitive athletic background. This is about more than just sports.
It is more than just sports. And friends, we find values are being under attack. They've come under attack, and Texas Values is standing up for morality, standing up for these values, and matter of fact, putting together a very meaningful conference this coming weekend dealing with these matters. You can get more information at TexasFaithFest.com, TexasFaithFest.com. We are going to take a quick break, and friends, when we come back, I've got just a couple more questions for our guests. We'll also be giving you opportunity just to few minutes into our next segment to call in with your questions and comments for our guest as well. But these values are under attack, and friends, they are front and center, even in the campaigns that are underway right now. Not only that for president, but we're seeing that on the congressional level, both the House and the Senate. It's happening in our state houses and even down into our sheriffs here in our counties, our district attorneys. Will they uphold values? Will they uphold the law? Or will they disregard it? We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk.
Crosstalk as we know it began airing in 1987.
Good afternoon to you, Vic Eliason here. We are going to be talking today with...
It comes your way from the VCY America network out of Milwaukee. Did you ever wonder what the letters VCY stand for? Ever pondered what's behind the ministry that presents Crosstalk every day? We're pleased to share with you a free copy of the magazine formatted book, God's Continuing Miracle, The VCY Story. This book of over 200 pages presents nearly 500 photographs, interviews, historic newspaper articles, and writings about the VCY America ministry, now over 60 years old. The magazine will also inform you about VCY rallies, the Birthday Club ministry, the VCY bookstore, and so much more. It is a testimony to God's faithfulness. To receive a free copy of God's Continuing Miracle, The VCY Story, call 1-800-729-9829.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. You're listening to a special interview with Jonathan Saenz, president of Texas Values, and their website, texasvalues.org. They also have their event coming up this weekend, the Texas Faith Fest, texasfaithfest.com. A number of speakers coming in for it, a number of topics, and those of you within the state of Texas in particular, not that far from you, taking place in Austin. We were just talking, Jonathan, in regard to sports, and many just, had their jaws dropped during the Olympics themselves, seeing the impact that those who did not come away with tests showing that they, were biologically female, yet taking victory in female sports.
Look, it was absolutely absurd, and, it was heartbreaking. Women were taking a beating. I hate to say it that way, but that's the reality in Olympic sports by men. And very few people, the Olympics Committee not standing up for them. Social media had a meltdown over this issue. People on the left and the right. You got even ESPN sportscasters like Kirk Herbstreit, right? A guy that's like a jewel for College Game Day on sports talking about these issues. And so it has transcended political lines. It's transcended, religious lines. And, it's all over the world, right? And everybody was watching. What a black eye, what a stain for the Olympics that they had an opportunity to do the right thing when everybody was exposing it, and they simply watched and let it happen. How demoralizing is that going to be for young ladies? Knowing, what's at some point, a spot's going to be taken from them. They're going to lose the ability to compete, to succeed, and their spirit's going to be crushed on this issue. But look, I don't want people to get disheartened, because when we stand up and say enough, not just this is not right, but then we follow up, right, with getting the right people elected, talking about these issues. And look, you have teams now, they're just forfeiting games. If the school districts and the people aren't going to listen, they're going to say, we're not going to play, right? If that's what's going to take for people. We saw that in the Olympics. One of the athletes said, I'm just not going to participate. She stopped early on in that boxing match where that happened. And so I think we're going to have to see more of that. And I hate that. I hate that, there's got to be some of that form of sacrifice. Listen, when I was a law student, I sued my university to protect the free speech rights of the pro-life group I was leading. I know what that sacrifice is like. I know what it's like to feel like you could lose everything that you've worked for because of what you believe in. But sometimes that's what it takes to convince people that we're serious about what's going on, and that we have a right to protect our fairness, our safety, all these type of things. But look, these are issues that I think we'll hear talked about in the debate tonight. The Kamala Harris, that campaign, they don't want to talk about protecting women's sports. They want to spin these issues because they know that they're on the wrong side of history. But I think a lot of what you and I are talking about today we'll hear in the campaign. in the debate tonight. We'll be talking about these issues at our event, the Texas Faith Fest. Mm-hmm. But, we talk to a lot of parents. This is what I hear. They are terrified to say something. And a lot of times we will shield them. We won't expose their name. As a lawyer, we work on a court case with them. We'll protect their confidentiality because they're scared to death of the repercussions of their kid walking down the hallway in school and being, that kid who stood up. But a lot of times if they do, there are other parents that will back them up as well. But, there's so much pressure on parents and kids these days to do well academically and so on that they're afraid to be that one person that holds their hand up and says, hey, something's not right here. But I encourage people, if we can help you in that way, that's what we do best. That's who we advocate on behalf of. We just finished a press conference here at our State Board of Education in Texas. We're just trying to make sure that kids can still learn the godly heritage of our country that is undeniable, the Christian backgrounds, the connections to our law and policy that the Bible talks about. What is a good Samaritan law? How do you know what that means, right? What is the golden rule, right? We know these things come from the Bible. We know there's nothing wrong with teaching kids about these things and their value historically and from a literary purpose. The Supreme Court said that, right? But we have to assert those rights. We have to be confident and courageous enough to say, I'm going to stand up for what's right, and I'm not going to let people push me around. Yeah,
and yet we have educators that are more concerned about pushing drag queens on kids than they are holding up the values that you were just declaring.
Yeah, no, I mean, we're talking about this in our press conference, too. I was asked by a reporter, are you worried about what a kid in elementary school might think, if they are exposed to the literary connection of the Bible? I said, you know what? The people that are complaining about that are the same people that want you to be okay with a drag queen reading to your kid at story hour, in a library without telling you. I mean, it's so telling what's going on and how things have been flipped upside down. But that's what's happening. There is this tug of war right now, and it's taking place so often in many of our public schools, sadly, but we got to wake up and realize that, and I think that'll allow us to put a stop to it.
And because people are waking up and speaking up on these issues, Jonathan, we're seeing some of these corporations, just heaving to the throwing away these policies from DEI. Harley Davidson, Tractor Supply, John Deere, Lowe's, all making changes now because the public is speaking up and they don't want to be branded, as with these crazy policies that are going out there, and they're making changes as a result.
Yeah, well, look, even my alma mater, the University of Texas, which people will criticize from time to time, they did away with their DEI program. We have state law that says those things have to end, whether some people like it or not. Those laws can matter. And part of that is having, you mentioned this, district attorneys that will enforce these things. Yep. We've been working on legislation to make it clear that there'll be punishment, there'll be consequences if district attorneys refuse to enforce these laws. Our attorney general we can always count on, but he doesn't always have the ability to reach down at the local level and enforce some of these things. And so we've been trying to empower him to do that and other people to do that at the local level. And look, hopefully these things don't have to go to court. Sometimes they can be resolved. Sometimes there's a genuine misunderstanding, but rarely that's the case. But you're not going to know until you stand up. A lot of times what we're able to do is give someone a letter. If you go to our website, you can find some educational resources that might be applicable in your state as well. We do this campaign every year that's called the Merry Christmas Project, just so kids know it's legal for them to talk about Christmas in public schools. It's so funny, Will Hill Trump talking about that, right? He'll talk about, how excited he is to, say Merry Christmas. Why? Because it's become a battleground in some certain settings that people think, they're going to get in trouble, if they wish somebody Merry Christmas, even a public school. And so we've got a law on Texas, but we give that kind of guidance because sometimes people do not know the law. I mention this when I speak sometimes. Proverbs 18:17 tells us this, right? It's biblical. He who presents his case first seems right until someone steps forth to challenge them. So there's power in knowing what the law is and what your rights are. That's what we do best. People are going to learn that at our event, the Texas Faith Fest. But we do it every day, not just an event once a year. This is what our organization does year-round. We're proud that we're a part of the Family Policy Council Network associated with Focus on the Family. So there's probably a group like Texas Values in your state if you're from another state.
TexasValues.org is the website. Friends, our phone number to Crosstalk today, your questions or brief comments, 800-733-9829. That's 733-9829. We're talking today with Jonathan Saenz, president of Texas Values. Again, texasvalues.org, also texasfaithfest.com for the event this weekend. Kamala Harris, Jonathan, has just recently released, the country's been waiting, and she just released her platform, the New Way Forward platform, it's being called. The platform only pledges, she not only pledges to codify abortion here, but also demands to have passed the so-called Equality Act, which she has pledged to sign into law. Could you describe what life would be like under the so-called Equality Act?
Well, look, if you're a Christian business, you're going to lose your religious freedom if she's president and if that law continues to be in effect. And they've passed it. I mean, they want to expand it. And when this thing came up, they did not want to have religious freedoms as sort of an exception and protect those type of things. They want you to be in jail or punished in some way because you believe marriage is between a man and a woman, right? We talked about this in our state. These are attacks on the Bible. We call these efforts to ban the Bible, right? Because that's what they want to do. They want to criminalize you. They want to target you because you live your life based on biblical beliefs. And that's not just if you're in public. That's if you're running a Christian business. I mean, we saw Jack Phillips, right? He had to go up to the Supreme Court because, he didn't want to be forced to bake a cake that went against his beliefs, not only on the marriage issue. Then some of the transgender people came out, after him. I think this was sort of staged. They try to force him to make a transgender or a rainbow cake. They'll target people like this. And these type of laws, they weaponize these type of issues to come after Christians and other people of biblical or moral beliefs. And it's not just Christians. I mean, there are a lot of other religions that don't support these type of LGBT issues and want to be left alone by the government. But it's not just the Department of Justice that's weaponized against Trump and other people, people that are praying in front of abortion clinics and protecting pro-life views. They want to weaponize and come after parents. They want you to be afraid. They want to make it illegal for you to raise your kids the right way. And it's not just Christianity. Even though that's the target a lot of times, there are other religions that have similar concerns. And, I think you're going to see that reflected in the decisions that voters make this November.
Again, friends, our number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. We begin with Greg in Minnesota. Greg, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. And living in Minnesota, it's become a sanctuary state for abortion and also now the transgender thing. And even Planned Parenthood is getting into that.
Yes.
And I think we can all do a little bit. What I've been doing, I'm a street counselor at a local abortion clinic. Mm-hmm. And if I can do that a little bit and make that little bit of difference, it's about planting seeds, for these women coming in, and, it's up to God to do the rest.
Thank you. Thank you for the call here. And, Jonathan, that's really what it's everybody doing something. It's like I may not be able to do this, but I can do this, and it's people getting engaged.
Well, no doubt. And, we started in Texas, a guy named Mark Lee Dixon, a friend of mine. As a matter of fact, we gave him an award a couple of years ago for his pro-life work. He started in very small communities doing sanctuary cities for the unborn, right? Mm-hmm. And I hear your caller's concern about sanctuary cities for abortion, but find a community that's supportive in your state that might pass one of these resolutions on the pro-life issue, get started there, and then keep moving and building some momentum. And this is the big thing, right? A lot of times elected officials, even though they're with us on some issues, they want to be convinced that they can do these things and then get reelected. So you might have to block walk for them, too, to let them know, hey, I'm going to back you up if you vote the right way on these type of things. But, that's a lot of times how you get things done, and you start small and build from there.
And let's go next to George in Olney, Illinois. George, you're on the air.
I was going to make a comment, and thank you for taking my call. Throughout history, mankind has had a choice, life or death, the curse or the blessing. God basically said you cannot legislate morality, but in order for you to fulfill my promises, you have to choose to go this way. And we need to be an example rather than, beating people over the head with the book, the Word, the Bible.
Well, thank you, George, for your comments here, and we'll have our guests communicate as well. But we must get back, in my opinion, to thus saith the Lord. I mean, Scripture does lay it down. We've so watered down His word. But at the same token, when we say, thou shalt not murder, I mean, that's legislating morality. You should not steal. I mean, that's legislating morality. Any quick comment here, Jonathan?
No, you're absolutely right. And I used to hear that when I was a young lawyer and advocate. You know, people would say, oh, you can't legislate morality, and they think that they stumped you. And I'm like, what do you think those laws are from the Ten Commandments, to your point about not murdering and things of that nature? That's what that comes from. You absolutely, and sometimes you have to legislate morality. Now, that doesn't mean people will choose to do that, but there's no doubt that when you have a law that says here's what you should and shouldn't do, it has an impact on how society and the culture and people decide to live their life. I brought that up in our first segment, the fact that there's not any, there's almost...
Tell you what, we got to take a quick break. We're back in 1 minute. This is Crosstalk.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website is worldviewtube.com. Recently, Tucker Carlson had on a historian that he praised, and this historian, Cooper is his last name, basically said that Hitler didn't mean to do the Holocaust. It was just poor planning. Well, that is absolutely 100% false, and it fits into the category of being a Holocaust denier. Edwin Black wrote the premier book on this. It's called IBM and the Holocaust. It's about the size of a phone book, and it details exactly how IBM's punch cards were used to track down the Jews, to know everything about them, not only their history, their heritage, being Jewish, but their occupation. And then they cross-referenced those to their bank accounts. Now the United Nations is holding a global conference to do the same thing, give all of us digital ID that's mandatory under their 17 goals of the 2030 agenda. History seems to be repeating itself along with the rise in active euthanasia.
Friends, we have lessons from the time of the judges as recorded in the Old Testament about every man doing that which is right in his own eyes. Yeah, you can't legislate morality. We just everybody do what is right. Look at the chaos, friends, we are in. Look what happens when we do not enforce our laws across this country. With us today is Jonathan Saenz. He is president of Texas Values and website texasvalues.org, texasfaithfest.com. Our phone number to Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. That's 800-733-9829. John is calling from West Virginia. John, you're on the air. Hello, John.
You talking to me?
Yes, John. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Yes, I've got two comments about where my half-brother told me about when he heard on the radio. Well, something weird happened last week. By the way, I'm a grandfather. You still there?
Let's get right to your point, John. Time is precious.
My daughter-in-law had twin boys. And the next morning, the doctor come in and told the parents that she was giving them 24 hours so they can put their kids down. In other words, kill them.
Really?
Strong, healthy little boys. And, you talk about somebody getting mad.
Mm-hmm.
I don't go in for that.
Okay. And what was the rationale? Why were they saying they should terminate their life, kill them?
Too much. I didn't catch all of it because he was so mad. But evidently, there's a demand for fetal tissue or something.
Okay, so he wanted abortion to take place so that they could harvest the tissue.
But babies was about a day or two old.
Yeah. Well, and I thank you for the call. I hearken to, the former governor of Virginia here, Jonathan, too, who said it should be left up to a doctor and the mother, after a child was born that they had intended to abort or something of that nature. And, I mean, it is just barbaric what is being planned.
Look, it's hard to trust the medical community these days with some of the stuff that they're doing. And, yeah, there are parents that go to the hospital to deliver their child, and they're nervous about these things, and they shouldn't be, right? We've got to make it clear that there are lines that you should not cross. You know, Rick Santorum came on my podcast a little while back talking about his daughter who has trisomy 18, which is a very difficult disorder, but it's not a death sentence. It doesn't have to be, but that's what happens. These doctors, you know, just sort of presuppose, well, you know, it's probably better just to, you know, terminate the baby, or the baby's born with this defect. It's probably better just to, you know, end their life now because that would be compassionate. That's absurd. You have rights. People need to understand that too. They can say no. They can demand legal help. But you got to act quickly sometimes, and so it is good for people to be informed on these issues.
We're going to pick up one last caller, and this is Gary. Hi, Gary. You're on the air.
Yeah, I kind of disagree with a couple things you were saying. I don't believe the record in Texas is 0% abortions, because I actually they're not friends, but some acquaintances. There was 2 women that had one a medical abortion in about 6 months ago, and the other one had 8 months ago.
Okay.
So, I guess you would call that a back. What do they call it? Back alley abortion. Yeah. And
okay,
also,
what about this issue here, Jonathan?
Look, I'm not sure exactly which person. I'm going to assume that he's talking about there was a woman that made headlines, and you know she was there for the State of the Union address. I don't know that abortion took place in Texas. I think she left the state. But the statistics that came out from the state were from the previous year. So if this happened within the last 6 or 8 months, that will be released next year. But look, that's not. I mean, we want it to be at 0, and so if you see some of those things that are an exception in some of those circumstances, it's still a life that's lost, and so, you know, we'd like the number to always be 0.
Yeah, and then the second topic I was disagreeing with is that Algerian boxer lady. She never declared herself a lesbian or transgender. And they did find out, they knew that she had slight higher levels of testosterone.
Well, I understand that the individual carried an XY chromosome as well here, Jonathan?
Yeah, look, I mean, there was plenty of reports about the legitimacy to that concern with that particular boxer, and that wasn't the only circumstance. But, you know, that it was certainly there. And whether someone declares themselves transgender or not, you know, the biological nature of them being a male is a concern, and they shouldn't be competing in women's sports, whether, you know, they want to label themselves one way or another. And so I think people need to be careful, too, to not let false reports on these issues sway you, because that's what some people want to do. They want to muddy the water when the issue's crystal clear.
We understand the individual failed a test for being identified as a female. Gary, thanks. We're down to a minute and a half here. We do have to run, addressing the concerns that you had. And with it, 90 seconds left, Jonathan, I know one last topic here today dealing with churches churches and the whole matter of what they can and cannot do as it relates to the upcoming election.
Yeah, we got a great document on our website that can be applicable in any state called Churches and Elections. It's also on iVoterGuide.com. But look, you can have a candidate forum. You can tell people to vote. You can talk about the Bible and talk about the differences between the two candidates. There's so much freedom for churches. Just tell them to go vote. Just remind them of the election. Could be such an increase. Listen, one other speaker I'm going to just mention for TexasFaithFest.com is Coach Joe Kennedy. He fought for his religious freedom to be able to pray after a football game. It took him 8 years to win that. He's going to be at our event. People have to understand it can be very difficult to protect our religious freedom, but it is a first freedom, and it is worth protecting, and sometimes we've got to do it time and again, but oftentimes when we do, we win. He's got an inspirational story. He's got a movie coming out called Average Joe, but come to our event, go to our website to learn about these issues.
Okay, again, that's TexasFaithFest.com. And also TexasValues.org. Would like to just give one more shout out to the website you gave to LoveThemBothTexas.com, and really gives a help for new moms as well.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Great. Again, friends, you've been listening to Crosstalk. Jonathan Saenz, our guest today, president of Texas Values. They are dedicated to preserving and advancing a culture of family values in the state of Texas. A number of you Texans listening into the broadcast today, you can certainly check them out as well. TexasValues.org. They do have their event coming forth this weekend. Friends, Scripture tells us that we're the salt of the earth. We're the light of the world. And it's not either, it is both. And I trust you'll be effective as an agent of salt and an agent of light even today. God bless you. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.